Michael.
Hey.
Are you you're in a room? You got a room?
In a conference room in Washington, D.C.
All right, let me turn off Slack again for a second. They will not stop talking. Great. So like I said, Michael Katz is my counterpart in DC for SB Nation. He's in the DC office. They've moved around a lot as well. They have a really killer view of a lot of stuff in DC, though I'm continually jealous. And he gets to sit really close to our CEO, which is also a lot of fun. But he works on SB Nation, which has about 200 fan blogs and a crazy amount of traffic, and it's his job to corral the entire audience for that. Why don't you just tell us what your job consists of?
Sure. So yeah, I guess now that I can see y'all, how many of y'all are familiar with SB Nation? Cool, some of us. Great. Then I need to do better at my job. All right, cool. So SB Nation is it's a couple of things, right? So at its core, how it started is a community of fan sites. So blogs where fans who are sort of tired of just reading objective news coverage from their local paper could go and have a voice and find community and talk to each other about sports. So our sort of approach to sports is very obsessive, is very fan driven. And out of that grew SBNation.com, which is, our main sort of hub for national news. The same way that you would go to ESPN or Yahoo or, any other site like that, you could come to us and get, what I think is sort of a little bit more fun, a little bit more, I guess like whimsical, but also just sort of obsessive coverage of sports. Like, we are fans, we think sports should be fun. So that's SB Nation. My job, like Anne-Marie said, I'm the engagement editor for SB Nation. So in that role, I'm basically helping us take the awesome work that everyone's doing and making sure that people read it wherever they are on the internet. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, wherever people are consuming sports content. And increasingly that is on their phone, like while sports are happening, on social platforms. Just making sure that the journalism that we do, again, like, fans blogging, writing from home and stuff like that, that kind of translates now to all the different places that people like to consume content. So, yeah, I don't know, is that a useful starting place?
Yeah, what's your day like?
My day is just like hectic. Sports are always happening. And the social team, what I like about being, the engagement editor and our social team is that we're sort of the central nervous system for SB Nation's content, right? Sports is really especially driven by events, by news, by reacting to things that are happening. So I get in, well, first of all, I wake up and I like seize my phone from the side of my bed and like try and like absorb everything that's happened over the last, couple hours that I've been sleeping. And really just get in and try and jumpstart the day. Like, what are people talking about? What are things that we anticipate being storylines? What kind of angles can we take on them? And that's from an editorial, like written standpoint, that's from video, that's from original social content, which is, fun little graphics and stuff that we make. So it's really, it's really an editorial job. Like, social is for us is more just about the different places that people are consuming SB Nation content and the types of stuff that we have to make for those places. So I'm sitting in the newsroom, helping write headlines, helping, go over those type of things. And then occasionally, getting a spare moment to kind of think a little bit more about like our approach to platforms, how we tweet, how we post on Facebook. If we are going to the Super Bowl, we're sending folks next week. So I'll sit down with our writer that's going there and say, what kind of things could we be looking for that would resonate socially? Maybe they'll do an Instagram takeover for the week or, whatever that is. Just kind of planning out projects like that as well.
So when you're talking about something like the Super Bowl, how are you deciding what kind of stories and formats and platforms you're doing for that?
Great question. I think that when we send someone to a location, we talk a lot about like, well, what are we getting that we can only get because you're on the scene, right? So we'll have a very different conversation with the writer that's going and say, hey, like we like to talk about Snapchat a lot as sort of chaperoning a field trip. Go show people stuff that they can't see because they're not there. Last year we had 2 people at the Super Bowl doing social video, so Facebook Live and Snapchat, and they were at the Super Bowl. They missed like the entire first quarter of the game because they were just walking around the stadium and found like we got a great video out of this where it was Shaq trying to fit himself into a very crowded elevator and being like forced out by, I think it was Deion Sanders. And we were able to like write a blog post that was like that one on our Snapchat story. We wrote a blog post like watch Shaq try and squeeze into this full elevator at the Super Bowl. And like that's a very SB Nation thing to do. We think people would care about something like that. But it was sort of like a fun example of like everyone, like literally 500 people are going to write a game story recap of the Super Bowl. But we had something for people to follow along in real time on, social networks. And we had something that you would only get from someone who is there and someone who has like the sensibility of what people think are funny on the internet. So that's sort of how we go kind of think about at least like live coverage.
So what are some of the blogs that belong under SB Nation? Can you talk about maybe one of them and where their audience comes from and what like their biggest platform is? Like I know American Ninja Warrior is enormous on Facebook, but there's got to be other ones.
Yeah. So Emery, alluded to, we have an American Ninja Warrior site, which is a entire blog and really community, brand dedicated to American Ninja Warrior and really like the TV show, and then also as that extends out into sort of the lifestyle of like fitness and healthy eating and stuff like that. We found huge community for that on Facebook, some community on Twitter, especially like live tweeting the show, which I think is an example of like matching sort of the platform to like its usefulness, its utility. Twitter is a great place to talk about things that are happening in real time. But Facebook, there's, a larger audience there. So we really do it that way, and then a lot of it too depends on what are the talents and interests of the site editors. A lot of our sites really over-index on Twitter compared to a lot of other media companies, just because sports is so real time and so Twitter-driven. So we'll have big communities there. We spend a lot of time trying to like. These are really like, we use the word community a lot because that's really what they are, right? Like we had our Detroit Pistons blog. I remember last year, one of the like commenters passed away, and there was a whole comment thread about it happening, and everyone was like obviously very sad about it. They started like a GoFundMe page to help his family pay for, some of, the costs that go along with that. And it was just like, it kind of blew me away because just to realize like the connection that people had to each other from gathering in a space and talking about their favorite sports team. So I think that's one thing that we focus on, especially at the team blog level. But these are like really community driven sites, like our Kansas City Chiefs blog. When they were covering the playoffs this year, they did 5 Facebook Lives from every, from the playoff game, just to like, here's me driving into the stadium, and there were like 700 people commenting on it, like, wish I was there. So like really trying to make it places where, that might not make sense for SBNation.com for us to show a national audience, but if you have, 100,000 Chiefs fans, they're going to gobble that up. So we sort of think about that a lot in terms of like, who are we programming to and what are their interests and how can we kind of give that, in the best way possible.
And can you talk a little bit, I know you have some formats to show everyone, but can you talk a little bit about Facebook Live? Because you've got so many, you've got like your main SB Nation accounts, and then as you just mentioned, you've got a ton of other accounts. So because sports is such a live medium, what's your, not your whole strategy, but sort of your plan around getting things out live and in the moment?
Specifically on Facebook Live, or like how we program Facebook during live stuff? I
guess both, because you do both, right?
Yeah, we do both. So live event, just like live event coverage is obviously like that's the cornerstone of sports. Like there are the most eyeballs on sports, and people are paying attention when sports are actually happening, when games are on. We have, at other Vox Media brands, the social team works, more or less regular hours, or sort of hand in hand with editorial. We have a 8-person right now team plus some part-time help that works. We're staffing 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. And really we're like trying to, when we talk about like live events, we talk about a couple of things. Like the first is like, we always say we swarm social, right? So we're going to be very active on social during live events. We think that there's more attention during those times. And so we're not like bothering people by tweeting 50, 100 times an hour, that's kind of expected. And then we talk a lot about capturing moments, right? So a lot of stuff happens in a sporting event. And this like could be, if you don't care about sports, this could be covering a State of the Union address, or this could be covering an Apple tech announcement. There's going to be a bunch of stuff, and I'm sure you all follow like Twitter accounts that tweet every fucking thing that people say, and you get like really annoyed and have to mute them. We try and like be smart about recognizing when a moment is something that's going to really resonate. Like we think that maybe there's like 2 or 3 things that'll happen in a game that people really care about. And they might not even be the game. Like the AFC Championship, it was Tom Brady on the sideline wearing this like giant coat. I don't know if anyone watched that game or saw that, but Tom Brady was wearing this very silly jacket, and we noticed it and we were like, this is silly. So we just shared like a picture of it, and everyone was laughing. So we're like, all right, like we need to do more. So we like photoshopped him into a hot air balloon and like made like a video of his jacket deflating. It's like a deflate gate joke. We like put a bunch of stuff together and kind of like made like I said, like captured that moment. And that's like the type of stuff that we're kind of like looking to jump on. And then the other thing that we see always is Twitter will be steady through an entire event, and then at the end of the event, people kind of lose interest. Facebook is the opposite. Like Facebook, everyone's watching the game, and then they want to know what happened, or they want to read about it, or share something. So we'll kind of like keep that in mind, and at the end of the event, just like pump a bunch of stuff onto Facebook so that everyone can kind of catch up on their phone and see what happened.
In the class Slack, just so that everyone can see it later on, because it really is a work of art. Can you walk us through your format examples? I know you had a few.
Yeah. Can people see? These are the ones that I dropped in to.
Yeah. You know what? While your little face is on the screen, I'll open them and I'll share my screen so that they can see both you and that. Just give me a second to open it.
Yeah, sure. While Emery's getting that together, like one thing that we have really been kind of like drilling down on as a goal for 2017, and something that we started last year but have kind of moved into like are putting more emphasis on right now, is sort of the idea of repeatable formats. This is especially like a thing with us with original social. Like we know that in a given day there's going to be 2 or 3 quotes that people are talking about, or maybe 5 or 10 like interesting quotes. Like we used to maybe write a blog post that said like Russell Westbrook, I hate Kevin Durant, he's an idiot. Now we're like, people probably just want that quote as like an image or a short video. So we have like little templates that we've made to be able to kind of like just give that to people right on Instagram, right on Facebook, right on Twitter. And coming up with that, I think has helped us editorially in 2 ways. One, we're able to recognize things quickly and triage them. So when we see a quote, a little bell goes off in our editor's head. Hey, this would look great with this. Or if we see an interesting stat, we're like, hey, this is how we could do it. And then we're able to turn that around a little bit more quickly as well. So that's been good. Here's the example from today. We put this on Instagram. This is Dion Waiters, who is a basketball player for the Miami Heat. He hit a very important game-winning shot yesterday, and then when asked about it, he said, I just feel, though, like one of my favorite quotes is, I forgot it already. And I thought that was very funny because he, I don't need to explain the joke, but like if it's your favorite quote and you forgot it as soon as it, like you remembered it, so we thought that was funny, and we made a quick little image. That's kind of what I was getting at, is like, instead of doing this from scratch, we'll have a template that looks like this. We'll have a template that looks, a couple different treatments for it, so we can kind of just turn that around real quick. And what we found is like, people would rather engage with just the image, right, on social, than like see a link that has a picture of him that says, watch Dion Waiters' hilarious quote after hitting a game winner. Like, you don't want to click that, right? Like, we all like maybe have cell phones that have like a data plan, and we don't want to use all our data if we're not on Wi-Fi, or like you've tapped a link on Facebook and like waited 10 seconds for it to load and just failed. We're really trying to like go for engagement and make it as easy as possible for readers to engage with the stuff that we're making. Here's a little GIF that we prepped for the end of the national championship game. It is Nick Saban photoshopped into a scene of a little kid who wanted his uncle to go to a certain school and went to the other. It's, I guess, a little strange, like 2 weeks later without the context, but it was a viral video that had been going around that day, and we dropped it. We sort of like prepped that saying, if Alabama loses the title game, like, we'll have this ready to go right at the end of the game, right? That's one thing that we spend a lot of time thinking on, is like, what are moments that we know people are going to care about, that there's going to be a lot of attention and a lot of excitement around. Like, the easiest one is always like the result of a big game, the end of the game. So we'll kind of like work ahead and say, okay, we have this, and like, if Alabama had won, we had a totally different, treatment. There's, just like a warehouse of content that we never got to use, but that we prepared. But you got to kind of have it both ways, because speed kills, and at the end of the game, we just want to have something as quick as possible. What else? I think the other one I dropped in was
Instagram.
That we saw that one.
Facebook.
This is, yeah, the Facebook video. This is from way back during NBA free agency. This was when Pokemon Go was a thing that people liked. We sort of did like a little treatment that was NBA free agency as Pokemon Go. You get the effect, I guess. Just like, again, like a fun way to kind of play with something that's in pop culture that people care about, that's ties into a sports thing that people care about. Yeah, I think that's like, look, like, if you want just to like check the latest headlines, you probably go to ESPN. If you want to check your fantasy team, you might go to like Yahoo. SB Nation, we don't necessarily want to be the only place that you go as a sports fan, but we want to be like the most fun place, and we want to be a reliable place where that we're going to have like sane reactions to sports news that people are freaking out about, that we're going to have fun kind of original treatments on social. We kind of think of ourselves as like your friend, right? When we make things, we're thinking like, will someone take their phone and like turn it to their friend in class, or after work or whatever, like to show them what we did. And that's kind of like a success metric in my head, is that just like even the action of someone turning their phone around is like, I love to see that. Like, even with like my coworkers will like tilt their computer screen and be like, yo, this is great. Yeah, here's like the total opposite of this. This may not, I don't know how well this is going to load. This is John Boyce, who's one of our like more popular personalities. He did a 14-minute documentary about Baron Davis hitting the longest shot in the history of the NBA. It's gonna like murder this computer in Hangout. But yeah, like we do a lot of like fun, silly stuff. We also try and do cool shit for sports fans who want something more, like tell stories that we don't think other people are going to tell. And kind of try and do it in new and different ways. I encourage you to, if you like basketball, go check out, this is like the top thing on our Facebook page. Here's some other little like snacky videos that we made today or yesterday. So we're like experimenting. This is like a format experiment of like, do people like it when, like, can we make something that doesn't have, highlight footage, but just kind of like tells a story? That's like a big part of this too, right? Is like, we try a lot of different formats, and it's very important to find stuff that works. It's also important to recognize when something doesn't work and get rid of it and move on to the next thing. That's like an important part too, so that we're not just like wasting our time. And then, yeah, like some things we just find on the internet and, put them right on Facebook for people.
So when you're creating something like this, what's the idea process? Do you have the story idea first, and then you're like, what format does this fit in? Or this is a great video, let's give it a treatment?
Yeah, great question. So we have a room sort of dedicated. We call it Original Social. And basically we'll hop in Slack in the morning the same way that you would for, an editorial meeting for written copy. We'll basically say, we'll look at like, we have a Bachelor Facebook Live show. That's also a thing that happens. We actually do that with Rect, with where Anne-Marie works. But yeah, we'll hop in, and basically we're saying like, here are the things that are kind of like resonating online. And that could be a story, that could be an interesting quote, that could be a stat, that could be an event that's happening later today. And then we try and talk about like, well, what's the best way to, what's the best treatment for this, right? So like, sometimes it's a short video, sometimes it's a long video, sometimes it's a graphic, sometimes it's, it could be a number of different things. We have sort of like the different formats that we would want to like use to give it a treatment. And so it's the same editorial decision you would have about anything. It's just being had specifically by a team of like, social folks, and then sort of like either motion graphics people, video people, graphic designers, people with kind of like skills to make stuff. And they'll kind of, go back and forth and figure out the best way to treat it.
That's a great answer. I'm going to take this screen share off.
Cool.
No, maybe not. Still on? Okay, there. Thanks for going through that. Can you just take a few minutes and tell everyone how you ended up in your job and what career path you took, and maybe what's next, like where you see your job moving next, staying at SB Nation, of course?
Forever. Sure, I will try and make this short and not boring. I didn't know I wanted to do journalism. I went to the University of Maryland. I had no plans of anything. I decided that I liked sports and I liked writing, so wanted to try doing sports journalism. I went to our school paper, and the sort of like beats that are coveted, like covering men's basketball or football, were already taken and had people that were sort of tracked for that. And so I covered some other sports, gymnastics and like field hockey, which was a great experience. And then I sort of like, in order to, I really liked the internet. So I started a sports blog for our student paper and kind of used that as a way to like also go cover football. And I would go to like football media availability. And while everyone asked about like the game, I would ask like, who is the best at FIFA in like the football dorm, and like cut little like YouTube videos. And I found that like the athletes like would rather talk about that because it was just different and more fun. And I liked talking about it more because the secret thing about sports to me is that it's actually like, it's great, but like the results of the games aren't as interesting as like the conversation and the fun people have around it and the way that people use sports as sort of social currency. So I ended up doing a bunch of, video work and stuff like that. And decided that that was kind of like where I wanted to take this. So I worked I got an internship at AOL Sports, and I worked there for a while. I worked for a startup called Quickish, that was acquired by USA Today. I worked at the Washington Post on their engagement team, which was basically like helping, this was like 2012. So you can imagine like helping a reporter at the Washington Post like sign up for a Twitter account. Just like really sort of like simple, boring stuff. But that's sort of like every job that I've had has been kind of like helping places get better at the internet. And that's something that I'm able to do because I liked being online more. So I would say like what I would like impart to y'all too is like y'all have skills that just by being yourselves that newsrooms will want, or whatever it is that you want to do. Being intuitive with Instagram and Snapchat is hugely like useful. And I encourage you to kind of like, if there is like a space that you really like that you think would be useful to journalism, that you think's underserved, like carve out a niche there and either explain to somebody why that's important, or when that becomes important, you can become a person that people can go to for that. That's sort of been, that's been useful to me. And now I like working at Vox Media because everybody gets the internet. So we can just do cool stuff and don't have to explain why it's important, or why we want to do that. So that's been fun too.
It is really nice to work in a place with other versions of myself, because in most newsrooms you have one person who does every single job and you are out there on your own, but I have like 5 or 6 other people that do my job. So if I'm ever having an awful day and I can't figure out how to find a story, or how I'm thinking of a story, or how a newsletter is going to go, I can just like go on Slack and like ping him or anyone else on the engagement team and just say, what do you guys think about this? And it's actually a really nice feeling. But I think that the tide is changing a little bit. And like I mentioned last week, every editor is becoming an audience editor. So there will be lots of us running around.
That's what I was going to say too, is like, you asked where I think this is going. And like, I think like, for example, our social team and this original social team, like is actually just what a sports media newsroom looks like. So I don't think like the job of an engagement editor is disappearing, or the job of a social media professional is disappearing. I think that's just what a lot of jobs will be. That's just what editorial will be. That's not to say people, I mean, we still have reporters and we have people writing, and that's like hugely important. People love reading. But I do think that like we write a lot more with a mind about how are we going to, you know, where's this content going? What are we doing it for? That type of stuff. So, yeah.
Awesome. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, please ask me questions. I have talked at you quite a bit.
I have a question. You do to differentiate yourself between them.
I missed the first part of the question. I'm sorry.
I said, who are your biggest competitors, and what do you do to differentiate yourself from your competitors?
That's a really good question. I think about this a lot, actually. You know, I think a lot of people compare SB Nation to Bleacher Report because we sort of both came up at the same time as like digital, you know, new sports media companies that were kind of disrupting, you know, old stuff. I think, you know, they sold to Turner a few years ago for a bunch of money and have done cool, like actually a lot of awesome stuff. I used to sort of not think too much of them. Now I think they do really great work. Competitor, yes, but also like we became Vox Media, and it's a totally different thing. You know, we want, like I said, like we're not necessarily concerned. Like I'm not, at least with like everybody only reading SB Nation. But I do want, like, I like that people. Here's one thing that I'll say: like if you go into the mentions of like ESPN or Yahoo and like see like a response to their tweet, they'll always tweet something, and everyone will be like, delete your account, you suck, like we hate you. Like if you go into SB Nation's mentions, it's always friendly. Like it's always like during the World Cup, people are like, I hope the US scores more goals, so y'all tweet more like patriotic photoshops or, you know, whatever it is. I think that for SBNation.com, we try and be a little bit more human. We talk about that a lot. Like I make people, like when we're training our social media folks, like if they send a tweet that I think looks like it came from a brand account, I'll be like, would you send this from your personal account? Like this, you know, this is ridiculous. I think we really try and like act like a person, which people appreciate. And I think the other, like the main differentiator too is the communities, right? When I talk to people that know SB Nation, a lot of times they say, oh yeah, like I read Liberty Ballers because I'm a Sixers fan, or oh yeah, I read Buffalo Rumblings because I'm a Buffalo Bills fan. And there's also like a participatory participatory element to that too. Like a lot of people actually comment on the site or write for a site. And there's a lot of the people that I work with started as commenters. So I think there's like a little bit more of a community feel to our sites as well, I hope. But yeah, I mean, I think it's tough. Like we are all going to go out and cover the same things, right? There's going to be a handful of like videos that are tearing up like Reddit or Twitter or whatever, and we're all going to grab it. And I think we talk a lot about voices, and the way that we care about, and the way that we can kind of like, what is the SB Nation treatment of this? And it's kind of up to readers to say like, this jives with my taste, and I prefer to get this news from SB Nation. But that's a great question that I gave a nice rambling answer to. Who else?
Nick,
If you were a Pittsburgh Penguins writer and somebody write about the Pittsburgh Penguins, would you hire a Penguins fan, or would you hire somebody who would have more objectivity?
That's a good question too. I mean, I would say this: at most of our blogs, we have both, right? And everyone brings different stuff. Like we have people that cover things. When I started at SB Nation, I covered the Wizards for our SB Nation regional site just because I lived in DC and I wanted to it was an opportunity to write about basketball. So I went to Wizards games and just looked for, funny stuff that I thought people would like on the internet, and tried to get our stuff picked up by other basketball blogs and stuff like that. And I think that, I was writing, partially for a Wizard-centric audience and partially for, the greater web and basketball blogosphere. We have other people. So we do have people with journalism backgrounds that want to do this professionally, and that's kind of the way that they approach it. We also have people that are just huge fans that just want to have their opinion heard, that have feelings, that say things that resonate with other fans. And that's great too. I think that's what makes these sites really fun places and great places for community, is that it's not only one type of person can be there, right? It's we all care about this one thing, and this is a place that we can talk about that. So I think the answer is either.
So I got one. What? So you mentioned sometimes you have to realize what doesn't work and then back off of it, or can you think of one thing specifically that recently that didn't work that you guys?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, we're obsessively just gobbling up numbers on stuff and kind of looking back at everything that we did the last week, and what did well, what didn't. An example I would say just off the top of my head is we tried out this end of game treatment for something that we wanted to drop at after, I mentioned, there's this huge excitement always at the end of a big sporting event. We wanted to have something that we could always drop, so we had this format called the case file, and it was basically a 30-second cold case where we would solve the mystery of the murdered Patriot secondary or something. So it'd be it was sort of Clue meets Law and Order. It was Matt Ryan with the 4 touchdowns in the it would be a little manila folder, and it was a really clever conceit that I wish worked better. But we did it for the divisional round games, and then again for we noticed some things and kind of tried to speed it up a little bit, and then we did it for the conference championships, and they just didn't really perform how we thought they would. So we had a conversation about that, why do we think this is? And we said well, one, it's a little bit slow, right? You have to kind of wait for the information to unfold, and so at the end of a game, people are looking for something to share quickly. They don't want to sit down and all right, where's this going? People weren't patient enough to see that. And then I think the other thing is it wasn't very joyful. It wasn't SB Nation. It was giving you a bunch of information. But the thing that at the end of a game, you're just excited, or you're pissed, or you want to see a cool stat, and you want it to happen really, really quickly. So we sort of had a conversation about that and said, all right, well, we can use this to inform the next end of game treatment that we try and roll out, but let's we can probably stop making these.
Awesome. Are there any last questions before I let you go back to your job? No? Awesome.
What's up? What are you looking at? What are you looking at tonight? Like, what kind of things are on tap for tonight for you?
Good question. It gets really tough after like football stops. Like, there's a little bit, you know, and we're sort of in that like in between week before the Super Bowl like really heats up. But we have like a nice little handoff at 5 when the night crew gets on, where we kind of lay out like, hey, here's what happened today. Here's what we're looking at tonight. The big thing, you know, off the top of my head tonight is NBA All-Star reserves get announced. Super exciting. No, but like people care about that. And so we'll sort of look ahead and be like, all right, again, like this is like niche, but like, well, if Damian Lillard gets left off again, like he's the first person who to average 25 points a game in consecutive seasons and not make an All-Star game. So like we know that's going to happen. We have a story like kind of pre-written for that and like an image pre-written for that. We'll have like a graphic made in case Joel Embiid doesn't make it or something like that. So we sort of like look at what we can anticipate being storylines and try and like hedge a little bit and make some stuff for that. And then we'll have people on to see where the conversation goes. When they announced the All-Star starters, everyone was just talking about how Russell Westbrook didn't make the team. So we quickly like came up with, you know, a few like ways to kind of triage that and do that. But I think the thing is like there's always something. Like people talk about it getting slow. There's like people want to talk about sports. That like ESPN is a 24-hour channel that just talks about sports. Like there will always be something to fill the vacuum and something will always come up. And so it's just about kind of like prepping where you can and also being ready to react and kind of having like that programming like flow chart in our head of like, here are the different things that we do to triage these different things that can come up. And then we can react to news quickly, kind of no matter what happens.
That's great. And I'm actually going to stick all of the links that he talked about in the class Slack, just for reference for later on. I'll do that a little bit later today. But thank you so much, Micheal Katz. It's so nice having you in the tiny bottom of the screen right there.
No, this is really fun. Thank you. Yeah, thanks. And please share my email with all these wonderful folks. And if you care about sports and want to chat, you know, shoot me a note.
Want to give your Twitter handle?
Twitter handle works too. They might not want to hang out with me after that, but yeah, thank you guys for listening and letting me be a small box talking at you through a computer.
All right, get back to the board.
You were like 4 feet across. So.
Oh, that's actually horrifying. Okay, that's good.
Probably should have. I'm glad we waited till the end to tell you.
All right, Emery, thanks for having me on.
Bye.
All right, take care. Bye.